Hi, Dr. Lycka, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm really honored and excited to have you on my channel. And I'm also really excited about our topic today, tips for breaking free from victimhood and reclaiming personal power. Now, that's exciting for me because that's my jam. That's what my channel is all about, and it's something that I truly live by. And yeah, I can't wait to hear the wisdom that you'll share with me and my listeners. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. And I think that's something that everybody needs to address. All of us get knocked down. All of us have this time in our life when we really have to get up off the mat. But it really is up to us whether we turn from victim to victorious. It is up to us whether we turn from zero to hero. It really is, we have to change our mindset. And that is from us deep down inside where we have to do that. We literally have to make a decision. We're not going to be that victim anymore. We have to
Yes.
turn the corner 180 degrees, pick ourselves up, and then no matter how many times we get knocked down, we get back up again.
Yes. And you certainly know a thing or two about that, right? I think you
I,
have earned the right to talk about this topic.
so, how do you turn from victim to victorious? Well, first of all, you have to realize that failure is not the opposite of success, it is part of success. Everybody that I know who has been a resounding successful person has had failure as part of it. But those depths show us the heights. Those depths show us what matter. Those depths really make it all the more worthwhile. And so when you go and get knocked down, it's just a stumble, it's just a roadblock. And what prevents us from getting to where we want to be is fear. And fear is something that incapacitates us. And all of us have a negative brain set that focuses on fear. And that's because our lizard brain had to deal with threats all the time. We had ferocious animals chasing us. We had hostile tribes chasing us, etc. So we always had to be scanning the horizon for things that were coming our way. So we respond with flight, fight, fright, freeze reactions, even before our cognitive brain knew something was happening to us. And it's up to us to get beyond those things and get to the upper part of our brain. So fear means forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And I
Yeah.
that people face everything and rise, realizing that these challenges are opportunities, that these challenges are really things that are something that once you get done with them, they're not as major as you thought they were. 95% of the things we fear never happen. So
Hmm.
is a statistic you could put in the bank. 4% of the things might happen, but they're much less than what you thought they would be. So 99% of the time, we're fighting apparitions, we're fighting ghosts, and that is because of unfinished things in childhood when we really did not deal with things well. We were being punished by our parents for doing things inappropriately, etc. And we still always react to things like we did as a 3-year-old.
Hmm. And I also think with that, to face your fears, you need a level of confidence to do that, an internal locus of control that you'll be able to deal with it, whatever life throws at you. And I always think that certainty is not about having certainty that life is going to work out exactly as you plan. Certainty is trusting yourself that you'll be able to deal with whatever life throws at you.
What I talk about often when I'm on stage is something called unshakable happiness. People say, "What's that?" Well, that basically is that you're happy inside of yourself despite what's going on in the world around you. So to me, happiness is a spectrum. At the one end, you have sadness. And sadness is something we all know about because we all have sad days. The next level is happy for bad reasons, like for addictions, like drugs, medications, sex, all the things that you can get addicted with, alcohol, all the bad reasons that people are trying to drown their sadness with. And then there's happy for good reasons. Now, there's nothing wrong with good reasons. But the problem is all these things that you're working on, like your job, your family, all these things, what happens if they go away tomorrow? What happens if your spouse of several years all of a sudden dies and this has been your fulcrum point? And then there's happy for no reason. This point for happiness. And that is really what determines how good you do. That really determines how content you're going to be in any situation. That determines what you can do. And the good news is happiness can be learned. Happiness is not
Great.
something that you wake up one day and say, "I'm going to be happy the rest of my life." None of us are that way. But you can actually learn the techniques of being happy. And by doing so, that makes a huge difference in your life and what you do every day. Like if you spend 5 minutes in the morning with a gratitude journal and write down all the good things you're happy about, well, can you picture what that day is going to look like? What the color of your lens is going to be? How the world is going to be with rose colored glasses rather than negative things?
And you can have a perfect day, and then one bad thing happens, and then as soon as your spouse comes home or your partner comes home, that's the first thing you pound on, and that's all you focus on. But that's the way we wired to a certain extent. I think we almost, it's easier to focus on what's negative, and it has to be an effort and awareness to focus on what's positive. So, in your experience, if you focus on writing the good things down in the morning and in the evening, does that shift the way you automatically think?
Automatically changes things. And you know, as you do this on a regular basis, your brain channels change. You literally elevate your game. You literally change the way you think and process that information. You're getting out of that flight, fight, fright, freeze reaction. You're getting out of those things. You're in an element of calmness. You approach things in such a way that when something attacks you, you don't get threatened by it. You just take it as another thing and you just move away from it and use it as an advantage. You use it in such a way that it's not another hindrance for you.
So, in 2003, you had a pretty life changing moment, right?
2003, I was walking with my dear wife and my youngest daughter in Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, ironically. And my wife turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" And I was taken aback. For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. But she persisted. "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about, dear." She said, "Listen to your foot. It's flapping." I said, "Flapping? What do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, listen to it." And my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed a right foot drop. It was flapping on the pavement with each step that I was taking. So definitely something was off in my body. She said, "Did you have a stroke?" And I said, "Dear, you're a doctor. I'm a doctor. If I had a stroke, I'd be lying on the pavement muttering something unintelligible." And then she said, "Well, when you get back, you better get this checked out." Well, Mandy, when your significant other tells you to get something checked out, what do?
You
You
get it
get
checked out.
checked out. So I went to friends that were doctors. They sent me to more doctors and more doctors and more doctors. At the end of the day, I'd probably seen about 100 doctors. They were befuddled because they couldn't find anything wrong. You know what a doctor does when he can't find anything wrong, Mandy?
He gives you a random diagnosis.
Well, that sometimes happens, but good doctors don't leave it like that. They don't say you're depressed. They don't give you a prescription and a pill. They do more tests and more tests and more tests. So I think I had every test known to man, and they even invented some tests to make sure every test was done. Then they still couldn't find things, so they sent me to a world leading neurologist. A neurologist is the brain guy. He's got all the answers for these complex pictures. So I walked in. He was sitting at this immense glass desk, and he had one piece of paper on it. And I said, "Hi." He said, "Hi back." And he said, "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." I said, "Why? I have a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order because in 6 months you're going to be dead." And I looked at him. I was taken aback. And I said, "Is there a way to prove this diagnosis?" He said, "Of course, on autopsy." The guy had
Lovely.
the guy had such a bedside manner I can't imagine. That's when I lost it. I stamped out of his office. I slammed the door and said, "I'm not going to die to prove you wrong." I got to my car and I cried for hours. Somehow I made it home. I talked to my wife and she said, "I don't believe it. You don't have ALS. I don't know what you have, but you don't have ALS." And then you go through the phases of death and dying that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book on death and dying. The first is anger. You become angry at the world. I was angry at my wife. I was angry at my children. I was angry at my staff. I was angry at my dog. I was angry at my cat. But you can't tell the people in your world what's wrong or they might abandon you. You go through bargaining. "Oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen." But I didn't think he was listening to me back then.
Mm.
You go through denial. You deny that anything is wrong. And I did. I'd work 12, 14 hours a day. I pretended nothing was wrong. But then my right arm became not useful. My right hand couldn't hold the surgical instruments I could do. And I was a right-handed surgeon, so that's a problem. But I became a left-handed surgeon. I literally changed over and became, I used the ambidextrous skills that I had and learned how to be a left-handed doctor. It was a challenge because there weren't even left-handed tools back then, but I invented them when things went up. Then you go through depression. Mandy, have you ever been depressed?
I want to say no, because I don't think I've experienced it to the depths that real
Yeah,
depression is. I think we're all sad every now and again we go through.
before, but sadness and depression are not the same. Sadness is really,
Yes.
this is where you can't eat, you can't sleep, you literally can stay in bed all day because you don't have any reason to get out. You stare at the ceiling, the world's black, everything's black, and it's a very hard thing to get out of. I wasn't going to die like I had seen people die with ALS, drowning in their own secretions. So I had a plan to kill myself. But before I did that, I went to my wife and I said, "Dear, what do I have?" She said, "I don't know, but you're smart. You'll figure it out." I said, "How can I figure it out? I've seen hundreds of doctors." She said, "You probably haven't seen the right doctor yet." Then it dawned on me, back in the early 2000s, something new was invented. It's called the internet. Ever hear of that, Mandy?
No idea.
No idea what that thing is. But it was primitive back then. You had to put a phone on a cradle, and it used to go rea, rea, rea for 15 minutes. And if you got to the other side, and I say if, because a lot of times it would hang up before you got you there, you'd talk to the people on the other side. And back then, there was no Dr. Google, there was no Dr. Yahoo. You literally had to get on by this way and use a primitive language like DOS to communicate. And the internet back then was much like it is now. It's full of the best resources, but it's full of garbage cans, and you can't tell the difference from the garbage cans from the best resources. So you need a guide to help you along. And I had friends that were nerds that really helped me. And they helped me find a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the name of David Martz. And David was brilliant, and he had gone through the same thing that I did, except he got worse much more rapidly. He was on his deathbed within weeks of his diagnosis, and he was so beloved, doctors from around the world were saying goodbye to David. So a doctor came up from Texas, Dr. Harvey, and he looked at David and he said, "I don't think you have ALS." David whispered, because that's all he could do. He said, "What do I have?" The doctor said, "I think you have chronic Lyme's disease. I think you've been bitten by a tick, and I think that's causing your illness." Well, David said, "What do I do?" And the doctor from Texas said, "You need do nothing. I'll start you on treatment, and if I'm right, we'll get you back to your usual self." And David was started on treatment, and within 2 weeks, he was like Lazarus arising from the dead. He was dancing, he was singing, he was back to his usual self. So I knew I had to talk to David. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs. And David said, "We got to talk. Can you come down to see me?" And he started me on treatment. And that's why I'm here today. I led the pack in cosmetic surgery until 2019 when I walked away. And I wrote an international best-selling book, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. I was going to go around the world speaking, but the world had a different idea. So what I did was I said, well, I'm used to run a podcast as a cosmetic surgeon. Maybe I can do it again. So I did. It got very popular. It got picked up as a syndicated radio show. And now it's enjoyed by 7 million people a month. So, life's interesting. And, this is what I talk about, from being a victim to victorious.
Do you think, so after everything that happened to you, I mean, that's quite a traumatic story and experience that you went through. And I often think that people with these life-changing stories experience life to a deeper level and with more intensity. It's almost like an awakening. Do you think that level or that depth is possible even if nothing horrible happens in your life? So do you
I think
need that defining moment, or?
I think people can live vicariously through people that have experienced these moments. I think people can listen to the messages and take them to heart. I think people can find the things that they're teaching and learn from them. So when I talk about unshakable happiness, there are a lot, and my book will be coming out sometime next year on that. There are lessons people can follow to get there. Some of the lessons I already talked about on gratitude. Some of the lessons are very self-evident. If you listen to some of my shows and so on, I talk to people about them. All of these are baby steps to follow. And to change your course is not that difficult. All you have to do is 3 little baby steps a day. You know, everybody can take 3 little baby steps. The first thing you can do is wake up in the morning and you can say to yourself, this is going to be a fantastic day. I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to be a happier person than I've been in the past. Now, if you do that, can you picture what your day is going to start to look like? It's like if you buy a red car. Every car in the street is red. So if you start looking for happiness, it's there. You just have
Yeah.
to happen. Another thing I think people can do every day is to do something to pay it forward. Do something small to make it happen. The other day I was getting home from speaking at an engagement, and I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I went to a little restaurant called Chick-fil-A and got lunch. And there was a girl playing on her phone just on the counter next to me. And I said, aren't you going to have lunch? And she said, maybe. I looked at her and I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And I said, would you let me buy you lunch? And she said, sir, I'd love it. I haven't eaten all day. I'm going to the funeral of my father, and there was money to get me on the plane, but there was no money for incidentals. I haven't eaten all day. So what would you like? And so I bought her lunch, and she was just overjoyed. There's so many little things we can do like that. And the big scope of things for us, it's like the Spanish say, de nada. It's nothing. But we have to look for those opportunities and make the difference.
Mm.
Doing things like that is really what makes the world a better place. And there's so many opportunities like that. It's crazy.
That's very true. So, when it comes to that, what do you think the difference between a person is who becomes bitter versus a person who becomes an inspiration? Is it genetic? Is it conditioning? Is it environment?
When they've
What
done
makes one
when they
person?
when they've done happiness studies, they've found that 50% of what is about happiness is genetic. The other 50% is what we do with it. So even if you have a genetic set point to be bitter, you have the overriding potential to make it better. You have the overriding potential to change it. So, that you don't have to live with the genetic material that you've been endowed with. You can change it yourself. You literally can change it. And again, there are proven ways to make that happen. Follow my channel, follow my social media, follow the things I post. And there are clues to all this. And I post a lot. I post a lot of material from the speeches I've given. So follow them, take them to heart.
Yes. I also think what you consume makes such a big difference. And again, to the point that what a wonderful time we live in, that we have the internet and we can connect to people that we usually won't have any access to, inspiring people who have had great success. And we can make them our circle of friends. That saying, you are the average of the 5 people around you.
Should always be following something, learning from them. As I say, my shows have 7 million listeners. On my website, drallenlycka.com, DRALLEN, LY is in yellow, CKA.com. There are hundreds of podcasts on there that you can listen to. Get some good books. Read a book a week. I find people who really are different than others are those who are readers. They read a lot and use that as inspiration to change things. Go to 1 or 2 meetings a year, either online or in person, because they make a lot of difference on things. Those meetings make a lot of things. Every time I speak at a meeting, I make it a point of learning things from some of the other speakers that are there. That really makes all the difference and really makes all the wonderful things that go on with it. And I find that the opportunities are there if you take advantage of them. They're all around us, but you have to take those opportunities and use them. It's not going to work if you stay in your hammock all day and expect everything to happen. It's not. The world doesn't work that way.
Yes, and that's part of overcoming fear. That's one of your golden pearls in your book, is to face your fear.
Well,
And
exactly. As I said, that means either forget everything and run or face everything and rise. That's your
yes,
choice. In my book, there's 13 golden pearls. So those little pearls should help you along the way. And one of my favorite is on enthusiasm. Can I share that with your listeners, Mandy?
please.
Okay, once there was a carpenter, and his name was Fred, and he had worked for the same company for 35 years, and he was tired. He didn't want to do it anymore. So he went to his boss, threw the keys on the desk, and said, "Boss, I'm out of here." The boss was taken aback. He said, Fred, you're my number one carpenter. You're my master carpenter. What am I going to do without you? He said, "Fred, can you do just one more thing for me before you leave?" And Fred said, "Of course, boss. I've loved it here. This is the only job that I've ever had." He said, "Could you build me just one more house? You're my master carpenter. You're the only one that can do it." Fred said, "Sure, I'll do it." But his heart was not into it. He dragged his ass to work every day, and he barely got the work done. For the first time in his life, he made shoddy workmanship. Then a miracle happened when he had completed it. The house passed inspection. So he went back to the boss, threw the keys on the desk, and said, "I'm out of here." The boss said, "Hold it, Fred. We're going to have a big party. We've been waiting for this day." So they popped the champagne, they had the caviar, and it was a great party. And then at the end, the boss gathered everybody around and he said, "Everybody, this is Fred's last day. I'm going to be sad, but I know Fred's going to be happy. And Fred, as a token of my appreciation, here's the keys to the last house you've ever made." Now, can you picture what that house would have been like if he had put his usual enthusiasm and work into it? Now, I tell you
Mm,
this because every day is like that. The game changer is the enthusiasm you bring to it. The game changer is how you approach it. And if you approach it as an evil, ugly thing you're going to be doing, it's going to be an evil, ugly thing. But if you approach it with enthusiasm, it makes a difference. Mahatma Gandhi said, "If you're a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you can be." And that's the way you should approach everything, as if it's going to be the best job, the most significant job you could ever undertake.
that's so true. What a great story. I hope everyone remembers that next time they're asked to do something.
Abruptly and it's Monday morning. I don't want to go to work today. It's not what it really makes a difference if you approach it with enthusiasm or not.
Yes, and it's a challenge. So I think it's important to find meaning in what you do, no matter how mundane it is, and
And
that can tie in with a greater meaning of life, that a
yeah,
purpose
I
that you're
tell
following.
people in my book there's a chapter on Ikigai. And I'm not sure which chapter it is, but I encourage people to look it up. Ikigai, Ikigai. It's the Japanese word for purpose. And those are four overlapping circles. The first circle is the things you like. The second circle is the things you're good at. The third circle is what the world needs. And the fourth circle is what you can get paid for. And all those things become your Ikigai. Now, if you write down all those things in the circles and see what overlaps, you have probably 3 or 4 things that can become your Ikigai. And then try them on for size as your life defining moment. And if the glove fits, wear it. If it doesn't, try one of the other ones on. And that's how you'll determine whether what your Ikigai is and what your purpose is.
And do you think people can find purpose in a job that is not their Ikigai? So some people might say, I'd love
I
to
think
do what I love, but
I think they can find meaning, and I think that can
hmm,
drive them to what they want to do. And sometimes a person can't leave their job right away because they don't have the means and opportunities for it. But let's suppose they wanted to get a higher education. Well, they can take those courses in the evening school and weekends. So then they can move themselves to that position that they could be in. So they can move out of where they are now to where they want to be.
what is your motto or mantra in life?
You know, I think the most important thing is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. I think that is a very important mantra to people. There are always things that are going to happen to you. There are also always going to be things that are unexpected that happen to you. But the thing is what you do with what happens with that is so important. And if people haven't read it already, I would suggest people read the book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. It is about a prisoner of war in a Nazi concentration camp. And Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, and he was, of course, still a prisoner, so he wasn't treated that way. And he found the people that survived the concentration camp were those that had a search for meaning. They had a purpose around themselves. And I think that is something we can all learn from. Even to the most terrible circumstances, if you can find a purpose and something to do, you will always get beyond it.
That's very true. I love that book. It's a tiny book, but it took me like 3 months to read just because it's so dense in the story. It's a weighted book,
Very
content wise.
Very much so. I think people should always try to read at least, I say, a book a week if they can. They should always try to remove stuff because that's how they get better. That's how they learn new worlds. That's how they. And I suggest fiction and nonfiction.
Fiction as well, just to get your imagination going.
I think so. There are always different worlds you can explore, and that's how you explore different worlds.
Yes. I have another question that is regarding service, being of service to people. Oftentimes, when people have this life changing story, afterwards they devote their lives to being an inspiration to others, to helping others, and to contribute. And if you think about it in a logical way, it could also just as well go the other way. So it would also be logical to say, okay, I realized what I could have lost. I had this massive scare. Now I'm going to make it all about me and gather as much for myself. But oftentimes people turn that around and it kind of unlocks something within them. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think what happens with people when they go through something like I did, they either get bitter or they get better. And
Hmm.
I think that is often the determining things that go on with things. I think it is not as difficult as what people make it out to be. They don't have to be bitter. That is a choice. Being better is a much better choice, and you move forward as a result. So I think life is what you make out of it. Life is what you determine it to be. So you need to make those baby steps along the way. You need to choose those things. As I've said, it's not you wake up in the morning and you're going to be happy for the rest of your life. It's not you're going to just do things in one way and that's all. No, you're going to keep on trying things, doing things. Uh, you're going to have sad days, you're going to be happy days. But if you do things in such a way that's positive, the world is going to be a positive place.
Perfect. I think that sums it up perfectly. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been great chatting with you, and thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom. And thank you for making the world a happier place with your message.
Perfect. Thank you again, Mandy. Okay, bye for now, Mandy. Stay well.
Bye bye.